work is occupational health risk assessment, and we'll be hearing to uh, Dr. Fred Dolislager on this topic. He's an expert on this topic. And in this, in the last few years, we have a shift in our approach, research approach, where we are now more into looking into the occupational health problem before it develops. So its risk assessment is a very important part of that, and also how to provide solutions, how we can provide solutions and make the life of our workers better. So that is our target now, and we are moving with the principles of prevention, preservation, and progress. So that is what we are doing today at our institute. Without going any further about the institute's achievements, which we have a video which was released in the YouTube. You can see that about our this was a little bit older because it was prepared 2 years back, or rather I would say matters added to the existing video which was developed, which was created in 2016 at our 50th anniversary of the institute. So we are now 50th Foundation Day. We are now so matters were added to this video. You can see in detail what the institutes have achieved, what kind of solutions we have provided to the workers. But I would rather request Dr. Fred to deliver his talk and enlighten us on this very important topic of health risk assessment at workplace. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir, for your enlightening talk. Let's make a moment to introduce our speaker. Dr. Fred Dolislager is a human health and environmental risk assessor in Environmental Risk and Energy Group. He has long experience in this field. His professional mission statement is apply risk management practices to ensure implementation to effective and innovative environmental techniques to hazardous waste site through the development of risk model and establishment of national guidance and policy. His work with Superfund developing national guidance and policy through computational website help an effective risk assessor when doing site assessment or reviewing of work others. Particularly, his involvement with regional screening label for chemical and multiple PRG websites for radian clients keep his work state of art. He developed several key models, which includes gamma shielding factor, area correction factor, room surface exposure, building surface exposure factor, CPM conversion factor, etc. So now let's us welcome our speaker, Mr. Fred Dolislager, to continue our journey of learning. Please.
Okay, if you will let me share my screen, then I'll go ahead and get started.
Your slide is visible, sir.
Okay, very good. Thank you, Director Das and Ravi Chandran and the National Institute of Occupational Health for inviting me to speak on this anniversary. I met Ravi Chandran at a World Health Organization event in Switzerland just 3 months ago. He was kind enough to share some exquisite Indian pastries with me So how could I refuse his invitation to be here this morning? So these slides can be shared with anyone. The purpose of the PowerPoint slides is to just give all of you the hyperlinks for reference in case the demonstration fails due to technical difficulties. Note that this is a condensed version of a 3-day training. I will try to talk slow, but proceed quickly. It has never worked before, but this may be the first time. So on the first slide, you can see my contact information. Feel free to contact me anytime about any of the online tools that we're going to see today. So just for a background on our main website where all of the tools are hosted, it started in 1996 in Oak Ridge, Tennessee, as part of the Manhattan Project cleanup legacy from World War II. Today, the Risk Assessment Information System, or the RAIS as we call it, but most people internationally call it the RAIS. Either one is fine. So we started supporting a local activity and it turned into an international database and resource. So we have users from over 80 countries. The RAIS is a system of databases and calculation engines and has spawned to support the US EPA and a lot of their web calculations. So that is my primary role, is to work with the EPA to develop their policies and risk assessment models. So these are the topics for today. We're going to talk about toxicity values and how to get them and how they're used in the risk assessment process. Chemical parameters, how to access those. Then we're going to do some risk calculations and we're going to do some screening level calculations. And if we have time, we'll look into some lead modeling where our target person is a pregnant female worker. So I find the risk assessment process to be circular in nature. So we're going to jump right in, but hopefully, like a cat, we will catch our own tail instead of chasing it. When you find the RAIS, this is what it should look like. And the RAIS operates with some drop-down menus. You just hover your mouse over it and these different tools will pop up below it. So it's at this point when we talk about this website where I need to give credit to Leslie Galloway and Katie Noto, who are our lead programmers and database managers. They make everything look nice, and Caressa Manning and Deborah Stewart work with me to provide content and answer all of the user questions. Again, here's just a page with hyperlinks in case everything goes bad. You will hopefully get access to these slides, and if you forget anything I said, you can come back and click on these links and take you to these various tools. So these are the ones that we produce for chemicals. We also work with Superfund for the US EPA on the radionuclide websites. So we do chemical and radionuclide risk assessment. I'll take a moment on this slide. So I have this acronym PRG that stands for Preliminary Remediation Goals. It's a fancy way to say a screening level. I usually use those two words interchangeably. So preliminary remediation goals, PRGs, and screening levels, we'll talk about those. So in addition to the tools we're going to look at today, there's a lot more going on. At this particular website, there are 3 media transport tools, 4 background evaluation tools. There are tutorials and guidance pages, at least 20 other sub-sites that you can click on for data manipulation and search. And behind the scenes, there are 100 Oracle database tables. And using SAS, we calculate over 700,000 unique screening level equations. And there's 49 million data points that contain things like toxicity values and chemical specific parameters that we also maintain. So this slide has many zeros in it. We got a brand new web server about a year ago, but we forgot to connect the tool that keeps track of our users. But I just wanted to show you that since we reactivated that we get about 2 million hits every 3 months. And those hits do come from a lot of universities, local, federal, and international organizations use our website. And I can always tell when the universities are handing out homework because I receive lots of questions. So I mentioned our involvement with the US EPA. For chemicals, their regional screening level website is used by many states and federal agencies within the United States. A few other countries have adopted the models that we have and have programmed them in their own languages and for their own typical exposure scenarios. We also do vapor intrusion and these regional removal management levels. Those are in the instance of a chemical release. If those screening levels are exceeded, then we remove the people from the contamination. And these last 2 links are resources for toxicity values. We don't have time to talk about everything, but we'll move on. So I mentioned the radionuclide pages. Here's a whole list of them. We have many of the tools that work on environmental media like air, water, and soil. We also have tools to assess the radiation risk to inside buildings and outside buildings. And all of those tools have a dose-based sister tool. So we do dose assessment for radionuclides and risk assessment. This pictograph here is a slight demonstration of how the website actually works. So our toxicity values are stored in our Oracle database along with our chemical parameters. SAS is the software that does our screening level calculations, and you, the user, sit in front of the computer and type away on your computer and click your mouse as fast as you can, and we try to keep up with your demands. The organization for most of our tools deals with the land use, such as a resident or a worker. Today, I'm going to focus on the indoor worker. And then with each of these land uses, we have media that are addressed. And within each media, we have different exposure routes. So for the indoor worker, if soil is of concern, we would look at ingestion and inhalation. If air is of concern, we would just look at inhalation. This slide shows you the web address to access the toxicity values. When we will demonstrate this here in a moment, but generally each tool will have a link at the top that you can click that will give you some very brief instructions. So if you forget everything I say today, just remember that you can access a little user's guide at the top of most of the tools. And each tool will have a pick list. And in this example that I did here, I scrolled through the pick list and I grabbed benzene, benzidine, trichloroethylene, and vinyl chloride. And then on the page, you will have the opportunity to pick the toxicity values that are of interest to you. We have 5 inhalation toxicity values and 5 oral toxicity values. When it comes to dermal exposure, we use our oral values with an adjustment factor to convert them to dermal toxicity values. But today we're going to focus on the inhalation. So once you hit the retrieve button on our tools, you're going to get the results that you asked for. So in this case, I have my inhalation unit risk value for cancer studies for these chemicals, and I have an acute, a chronic, and a subchronic, and a short-term reference concentration for assessment of non-cancer risk. These toxicity values are the ones that are the highest in a hierarchy of toxicity values. To learn more about the hierarchy, you can go to the user's guide for a chemical screening level tool. But speaking of that hierarchy, let's take a little deeper look. So this is the output of another tool. And you can see that for, this is for benzene. You can see that we have 3 different chronic reference concentrations to choose from. The one that is highlighted in blue is the top of the hierarchy. And if you click on it, it'll show you what we call metadata. Metadata is the information that went into calculating that toxicity value. So the important things in the metadata are the target organ, in this case it's blood, and what are the critical effects, decreased lymphocyte count, and we can note that this is a human study from 1996, but it has an uncertainty factor of 300. We do have another tool that is dedicated just to getting that metadata. And if you execute it for benzene, we will give you the reference concentration that is associated, and then we will repeat all of these other information, including the uncertainty factor and the target organ. Okay. Let's demonstrate exactly what we just talked about. So here we are at the risk assessment information system. Let me make sure I'm on the home page. So here we go. If you remember, I mentioned a 3-day training. If you're interested, look at the banner here. There's a information how to register for that training. But we want to go and hover over chemical tools. And we are going to look at chemical toxicity values. So this should look familiar. Remember at the top, there's the miniature user's guide that will guide you through just 4 simple steps to get those results. So this pick list, to get the chemicals that you want, you just click in it and you begin typing. There's benzene, and then you use the top arrows to bring it over here, and benzidine should be nearby. There it is. I'm going to come back and get trichloroethylene. And I'm going to get vinyl chloride.
Dr. Fred,
Yes.
actually slide is not moving. Could you reshare?
Can you see this open window?
Yes.
So do I need to go slower?
No, Dr. Fred, slide is not moving. Your voice is coming perfectly, but slide is stopped at chemical tools.
Oh, no.
Slide number 19.
Okay.
After slide number 19, slide is not moving.
Okay. Can you see this website? So I ended the slideshow so you can follow along on this website.
Okay.
I'll start over then. This might make more sense. So this is the Risk Assessment Information System homepage. Here is the link to that long 3-day training I was talking about. And to get to this particular tool for chemical toxicity values.
Dr. Dolislager. Dolislager. Hello?
Yes.
Yeah, slide is not moving. It is in still 19 slide.
How about now? Can you see the website? Oh, no, you can't. That was my fault. I didn't know that Zoom would make me actually switch the window. I thought it was just the monitor. That's my fault. I'm sorry about that. I think you can see the website now.
Now we can see, yes.
Okay, thank you. So when you were at the Risk Assessment Information System, to get to the chemical toxicity, hover the mouse over and go over to toxicity values. And you should see a list of chemicals now. I'm going to get benzene. And to do that, you just start typing the chemical of interest. I'm going to get benzene, trichloroethylene, and vinyl chloride. And for this case, I want to get the inhalation reference concentration. So you just select the 1 or 2 that you want. If you don't want it, you can turn it off. And on retrieve, you will get your reference concentration values. And of course, you can export your data. But remember, we talked about a hierarchy. So if we go back to the chemical tools, let's go look at the chemical data profiles next. And for this tool, we just look at one chemical at a time. And at the top of the form, it'll give you some general information about the chemical, and then all of the toxicity values that are in our database are available for you to look at. So it starts with the oral non-cancer reference doses, and come on down, we end up at the inhalation non-cancer reference concentrations. Remember, this is the value that is at the top of the hierarchy. So for our chronic values, we had 3 to choose from. Scrolling down, it'll show you all of the cancer toxicity values for oral slope factors and inhalation unit risk values. If you click on one, it'll take you to that metadata information. So I'm going to scroll down to the chronic reference concentration. So here we are again with the human study, decreased lymphocyte count with the uncertainty factor of 300. And this comes from a US EPA source called IRIS, Integrated Risk Information System. That's the name of that. And we have one more chemical tool under toxicity to look at, and that is the metadata tool itself. Remember, there's a mini guide, some instructions. And in this case, I'm just going to get benzene for us. And within this box, we have our toxicity values. Focusing on inhalation today, I'm just going to grab that one. And on retrieve, you'll get the information for the toxicity value. This tool takes a little bit of time to load because it's going through all of the sources of tables. So those are our toxicity value research tools to get the data for use in risk assessment. So I am going to try and share the screen back to the presentation. Okay, so we've made it through the toxicity values. The next feature are the chemical parameters. So if toxicity isn't your thing, but you use the parameters like melting point and boiling point for other aspects of your occupational health studies, this is a tool that we're going to demonstrate here in a minute. It operates the same. You select your chemicals and then you pick the parameters that you want. So you can see that there are a lot here. They range from acentric factors to vapor pressures. Now, within this list, we will give you an abbreviation of the chemical parameter, and we'll give you the units that we have those values in. So our chemical parameters also get put through a hierarchy. And we have multiple sources that I'll show you soon. Here is an example of benzene, and you can see for this output here for molecular weight, all of our sources agree that benzene has a molecular weight of 78.1. That's good. Looking at the boiling point, you can see there are slight differences in some of the experimental values, but we also have estimated values. And you can see the estimated value for benzene doesn't quite align with the experimental value. Okay, so we're going to go back and demonstrate where this information is. Hopefully that was faster than last time. So back to chemical tools. Right under toxicity is the parameter search. We're only going to let you get 1,000 chemicals at a time. Otherwise, it takes too long for the information to load. And that hierarchy that I mentioned, there's a link to it here. I'm going to grab benzene. And then you can click into this list. And we want to get the boiling point. There it is. If I type the letter M, it'll take me to the M so I can get my melting point and my molecular weight. You can get as many as you want. You can get them all with these buttons. And in the output, there we go. We have our boiling point and our molecular weight. I'm sorry, our melting point. You can export this data and save it for use. And the one more look at this tool, the chemical data profile tool. I only showed you half of it on purpose the first time. However, if you continue past the toxicity values, you get to see the chemical specific parameters. There are many here. Some do not have multiple sources, so they're listed here. But if you keep going down, you'll find the tables of values. So here's all of our molecular weights, all of our boiling points, enthalpy of vaporization, melting points, vapor pressure, water solubility, Henry's law, with and without units, density, organic carbon partition coefficients, octanol water partition coefficients, explosive limits, and further up, I went right past auto ignition temperatures and flammability limits, all of which are important for various uses. And then at the end, we have critical values. A lot of these parameters we use to adjust for temperature changes in water solubility and Henry's law, because those impact the risk mainly due to exposures to water. Then at the very bottom of this tool, we give you the definitions for all of those sources that we have. So you can come back and find out what all of these mean, and web links to the original data sources and how we use them all. Okay, we should be back to the PowerPoint. So now that we know where our tox values come from and our chemical parameters come from, we're just about ready to do our first risk calculation. So when we say the word risk assessment, we really mean two types of assessment. Cancer risk is perhaps the one most people think about. That is the probability of getting cancer. And then we also do non-cancer risk assessment, which we call a hazard assessment. So to get to that risk tool, we're going to do just what we did before under chemical tools and go down to risk. But we're going to talk just a little bit more about it to make sure we're all on the same page. The main feature with doing a risk assessment is to figure out the intake amount of that chemical. How much chemical is in the air, water, or soil. And as mentioned, cancer risk is a little bit different than our non-cancer hazard that we assess. But the equations are very similar. So CDI here is for our chronic daily intake. And we need to know the concentration in the air. And then we will multiply it by the days per year the person is working, how many years they work, how many hours per day they work. And for cancer, we divide it by their lifetime. So this means that their exposure to this chemical could give them a cancer throughout their entire life. For non-cancer, it's very similar, except we only care about the time that they are exposed.
Excuse me, Dolislager. Slide not moving.
Okay. My screen sharing is paused.
Dolis, we are in 19th slide.
Sir, please you may reshare your slide so it will start working.
Okay, it says I'm sharing now.
Yeah, now it's moving.
Okay. I'll go quickly through this. So for cancer, we care about probability, and we want to know how much of that chemical you are intaking. And for non-cancer, we want to know about the exposure just through your working career. To calculate the non-cancer, we call it a quotient or a hazard quotient. A quotient is simply the result obtained by dividing one number by another. So if your intake exceeds your reference concentration, that means you have a problem. That means, you may go blind, your hair may fall out, and you may get a rash. But once you're not exposed to that chemical anymore, your hair will grow back and your sight will return and your rash will go away. But remember that cancer can stick with you forever. To looking at it on a graph for cancer risk, our blue line is our intake or our dose. It will increase linearly forever, but when we calculate the risk based on that dose, the probability of getting cancer, it can't exceed a value of 1. So at a very high exposures and very high risk, our linearity goes away and it flattens out at 100% probability of getting cancer. I can't give you a 200% chance of getting cancer. It stops at 1. And looking at non-cancer, the blue line is our intake. As it increases, it matches directly with our hazard quotient value. So the more of this chemical that I give you, the more of the hazard is going to impact you. This green line is our reference concentration. So below this green line, your dose is okay. It won't give you any negative effect. But once you exceed the reference concentration or the reference dose, you're in the effect zone. This is when your hair will fall out and you'll go blind and you'll get a rash. So using the tool that I'm going to demonstrate, I inputted 250 days a year for 25 years, 8 hours a day for 70 years for these chemicals. And this is what the output's going to look like. We're going to have the toxicity values that were used, the concentration in the air that you, the user, will enter, and these chronic daily intakes that say how much of the chemical you were exposed to, and then we calculate the hazard quotient and the inhalation risk, and they are totaled for each chemical and presented at the bottom. So for this total is less than 1 for our hazard, which means it's okay. And our cancer risk probability is 6.6 in 1 million. That's pretty good too. So no problems there. Okay, I'm going to switch again. Okay. Okay, hopefully I'm back to the website.
Yeah, website is.
The website, good. All right, let's calculate some risk. So under chemical tools, you go down to risk calculation. There is a brief instruction. So the first thing we want to do is select our scenario, indoor worker. And we want the media to be air. And then you're given a choice for data sources. Right now, we're going to stick with database hierarchy defaults. And we'll stick with the chronic exposure. And this pick list is a little different. In this one, you can type slowly. And it'll get you to the chemicals that you want. It also has CAS numbers that you can enter and abbreviations. So if the chemical name is different from what we're used to, you can just put in the CAS number. All right, so I have my land use, my media for chronic exposure. I have my chemicals. If you were interested in a particular class of chemicals, you could select from this list and they will all go in there. It'll make for a lot of extra work for you. We talked about the toxicity metadata. If you wanted to see that in the same table, you could turn this on. And if you wanted to know what chemicals are driving the risk, you can turn this on. I think we should do it. So now we are risk assessors and we need to know the concentrations. I'm going to enter a value of 100 for each of my chemicals. And if you scroll past that, this is where you can change your exposure information. Let's pretend that people to work 30 years before they retire. And instead of 8 hours a day, they work 10 hours a day for a 70-year lifetime. We hit retrieve. Of course, you can download your output. This first table is the exposure parameters that we changed. It's telling us where we changed from defaults. And if you scroll down, we have our chemicals, the toxicity values that were used. This is our concentration in the air that we entered. And our intakes are calculated, and then the hazard quotient and the cancer risk is given. So we have a color coding scheme that presents these in different ranges. So if you look here at the total at the very bottom, if you sum these hazard quotients, you get the hazard index of 15.5. So that is exceeding our value of 1. So this person is going to have a problem. And looking at cancer risk, it's almost 100% probability of getting a cancer. So at these concentrations, these chemicals are very bad for you. People converted contributing 92% of the risk for hazard quotient, and for benzidine, 99.9% of the risk, cancer risk, is coming from it. So benzidine and trichloroethylene would be the chemicals of concern for this scenario. Okay, I'm going to go back to the presentation. Okay. So the next part of our risk assessment process is going to be calculating a screening level. This is where we're going to find it. So let's go back to a little bit about some risk assessment basics. So we just did a forward risk assessment where we had a concentration and we calculated the risk. Screening levels are sort of a backwards risk assessment where you determine a protective media concentration based on a target risk. If you have air data, you're going to want to compare that to air screening levels. Soil data would be compared to soil screening levels, and water data to water screening levels. The main goal of a screening risk assessment is to figure out the contaminants of potential concern that you would focus on in a forward risk assessment. Another quick review. This is a soil example where we have multiple exposure routes. So we have ingestion, dermal, inhalation, and total. For this case, we sum across exposure routes, and then we add those going down to give the total hazard quotient or the total cancer risk for all chemicals for all exposure routes.
Professor Dalis. Slide.
Slide not moving.
Dolis.
Okay,
Yeah, slide is not moving.
let me see. Did it move now?
Yes, yes.
Okay. For a forward risk assessment, you just add the risk from each chemical and each exposure route. But for a screening level, you have to do an inverse sum of the reciprocals for each of the routes. And this equation presents how that looks. For example purposes, I did our indoor worker again, based on a target risk of 1 in a million and a target hazard quotient of 0.1. And this is what our results are going to look like. So let's go demonstrate calculating the screening level. We should be back at the website, and the screening level tool is right here. Here is a link to a very long user's guide, but we'll skip that for brevity. So we need to pick our target risk and our target hazard quotient. You can change them depending on the necessity of your program. Just like the risk tool, we pick our land use. So here we want the indoor worker. We want air. And here's one more trick. Instead of default values, if you choose site specific, this default option here will just let you change exposure parameters. But if you do not like toxicity values and you don't like the chemical parameters that are our defaults, you can select user provided, and you're going to get to change everything. And I will show you. So let me grab some chemicals. So I have my chemicals, And let's retrieve. The top of this page, you can see that our, here we go, the inhalation chronic reference, our RFC, as we call it, is right there for each of these chemicals. If you don't like the number that is there, you just type over it and you can change it. So if you have unique sets of toxicity values for your program, you can use them here. And if you continue scrolling, you get into all kinds of different variables for lots of different land uses. But here we go. So here's a Henry's Law. If you don't like the Henry's Law that is in the top of our hierarchy, you can change it. You can change the octanol water partition coefficient. You can even change the molecular weight, vapor pressure critical. So here we give you the keys to the kingdom and all of the parameters that go into your screening levels or your risk calculations can be edited. Oh, and all the way to the end, if we have special rules for volatile compounds. If you disagree with the volatility status, you can change it here. This column has to do with the use of dermal exposure to water. If you believe the compound is a mutagen, you can change its mutagenicity status. That changes some of the equations that are used. And you can change the ambient state and whether you believe it's an organic or not. All of these things matter for some of the more complicated models. But if you scroll down, we have our exposure assessment information again. And we hit retrieve. Here's our exposure parameters given to you that you can download. And then our screening level are calculated here at the very end based on our target risk for cancer and our hazard index for non-cancer. So these are the concentrations that are protective of that exposure that we just calculated. Going to go back to the PowerPoint. Okay, we should be back. We have one last tool to look at, and that is for the lead modeling. I believe that we should have time to do that. So we'll go back. We should be back at the RAIS and our chemical tool. We're way down here to lead. So remember, this is based on a pregnant female worker. That's what for the adult. So we can calculate the risk from exposure to lead in soil for a worker. All you need to know is the concentration of the lead in the soil. I'm going to enter a concentration of 1050. We have equations here that you can look at that get into the details. But essentially, we have how much of that soil is being ingested for how many days per year. And then we have rather than a target cancer risk, or a target hazard quotient. We have a target blood lead level in micrograms per deciliter. And the general consensus right now at the EPA is it should be somewhere between 2 and 8. So I have a value of 5 put in here. So if you scroll down and hit retrieve, all of the inputs are going to be given back to you. And that concentration of 1,050 parts per million equates to a 5% probability of exceeding that target blood lead level. This is not a cancer risk or a hazard index. It just tells you the probability of exceeding it. The sister tool is the PRG, or the screening level calculator. The answer is already given to you down here. If you change the number of days per year, for example, that screening level will change. It is also based on that target blood lead level. So if you lower your target, the screening result will go up. If you raise the target, it will go up. So you can have more lead in your soil, the higher that the target blood level is. Okay, so that was the last tool to demonstrate. Come on. Here we go. So at this point, I'll entertain any questions, and I wanted to thank everybody for following through my poor use of Zoom and screen sharing, but I think we got the point that the tools are there to find the toxicity values for your risk assessment work and the parameters that go in it. You can delve into all of our sources, and you can change any of the values that you wish to change. And hopefully you did catch your tail at the very end, and keep working on the circular process of risk assessment. And thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. Anybody ask question from NIOH auditorium side?
Well, if you think of any questions later, you have my contact information in the slides to share with everybody.
स्पीकर कौन कर दे? Any question? Any question from ROC Bangalore?
Wait, Lokesh coming.
Excuse me, sir.
Yes.
Sir, when we calculate cancer risk based on different chemicals, say for example, chemical 1, 2, 3, the cancer risk is just a additive of all three, or is there any background calculation it is going to say based on the individual chemicals character?
So yes, for the cancer risk, it's just the summation of the chemicals that are there. Yeah.
Yes. Because as per toxicology principle, there may be a difference, no, sir, additive risk, there may be synergistic effect also. So that this will not take care this calculation, correct, sir?
Yeah,
It is just a additive.
yeah, the cancer risk is considered additive for each of the chemicals.
Yes. Thank you, sir.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Anybody? Anybody want to more question? Decline कर दे दें.
So, yeah, Dr. Fred, I have just one question, like in line with what our scientist from ROHC, Dr. Dhananjan, was asking, that can we anyway calculate even for non-cancerous risk, like if there is any synergism between different chemicals, is there a way to pick up if one chemical is potentiating the toxic effects of another? Can we pick that up?
So like a synergistic and antagonistic effects of chemicals.
Yes.
Unfortunately, our tools cannot do that.
So is there any other tool available to do that?
I don't believe so.
Okay. So if there is no further question, I take this opportunity to again thank Dr. Fred for sharing this, for demonstrating the tool, the very important tool that we can use for risk assessment of occupational and environmental exposures. But I do believe that, as he mentioned, that it's a 3 days intensive course that exists. So obviously it's a very large system that has many facets. So it would require extensive training. I hope that there are some online training system available for this, which we can participate from here. So I would request our scientist, Dr. Ravichandran, to explore this option, that how we can get at least few of us can get well trained in using this system, so that we can properly assess the risk that our workers are exposed to. With this, and again thanking Dr. Fred, I would conclude this session, scientific lecture session. Thank you very much. Thank you all.
Thank you very much.
Is it because of
It has been intellectually enriching experience, and we trust you all depart with better understanding and fresh perspective on our focus topic today. And thank you, our esteemed audience, for your active participation, making this webinar a vibrant pool of knowledge exchange. And thank you all.